Victoria Sterling's heels clicked against the polished marble floor of the downtown Seattle high-rise, each step echoing her frustration from the morning's disaster. She clutched her leather portfolio tighter, trying to forget how Marcus Thompson had torn apart her presentation in front of the entire board. 3 months of work, dismissed with a wave of his hand and the cutting words that still rang in her ears. This lacks vision, Sterling. Where's the innovation we're paying you for? The elevator lobby was nearly empty at 2:30 in the afternoon, most people already settled into their post-lunch routines. Victoria jabbed the up button with more force than necessary, her dark hair falling across her face as she bent to check her phone. No messages from Marcus, which could either be mercy or the calm before another storm. The soft ding of arriving elevator barely registered as she scrolled through her emails, still lost in thoughts of salvaging her career. She stepped forward blindly, her shoulder connecting hard with someone emerging from the elevator. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she gasped, looking up to meet the most striking pair of green eyes she had ever seen. The man before her was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair that looked like he had run his fingers through it recently. His charcoal suit was impeccably tailored, but what caught her attention was the way he steadied her with gentle hands on her shoulders, as if she might fall. "No harm done," he replied, his voice carrying a warmth that made her pulse quicken. "After you." He stepped aside with a small smile that transformed his entire face from serious to almost boyish. Victoria entered the elevator, trying to ignore how her skin still tingled where he had touched her. He followed, pressing the button for the 42nd floor while she selected 38. The doors slid closed with their familiar whoosh, and the elevator began its smooth ascent. Then everything went wrong. The elevator lurched violently, throwing Victoria against the wall as the lights flickered and went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie blue glow. The elevator shuddered once more before coming to a complete stop. "Well," the stranger said after a moment of silence, "this isn't exactly how I planned to spend my afternoon." Victoria pressed the emergency button repeatedly, her professional composure cracking. "This cannot be happening. Not today. Not after the morning I've had." She jabbed at various buttons, knowing it was futile but needing to do something. "I don't think that's going to help," he observed gently, loosening his tie. "I'm Gabriel, by the way. Gabriel Rivers. Victoria Sterling." She slumped against the elevator wall, suddenly exhausted. "And you're right, but it makes me feel better to try." Gabriel studied her face in the dim lighting. "Rough day." Victoria let out a laugh that bordered on hysteria. "You could say that. I just watched 3 months of work get destroyed in a 15-minute presentation. My boss basically told me I'm not creative enough for a marketing executive, which is like telling a fish it's not wet enough for water." "What kind of marketing do you do?" "Luxury brands, high-end campaigns." "At least, I used to." She slid down to sit on the floor, pulling off her heels with a sigh of relief. "What about you?" "Let me guess, finance." Gabriel surprised her by sitting down across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Investment management. I run a firm that helps startups and established companies expand into new markets." "So you're the type who only cares about profit margins and quarterly reports." He was quiet for a moment, absently adjusting what she now noticed was a vintage watch on his wrist. "Actually, I got into this business because I believe in supporting innovation. There's nothing quite like watching someone's dream become reality." Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. "That sounds personal. My father was an inventor. Brilliant man, but terrible with business. He had ideas that could have changed the world, but he never found the right backing. By the time I was old enough to help, it was too late." Gabriel's fingers stilled on his watch. This was his. He always said timing was everything in business and in life. Victoria felt her defensiveness melting away. "I'm sorry. That must have been difficult. It taught me that sometimes the most important thing isn't the bottom line. It's knowing when to take a chance on something extraordinary." They fell into comfortable conversation, the cramped elevator somehow feeling less confining. Gabriel told her about his volunteer work teaching financial literacy to young entrepreneurs, while Victoria shared her secret dream of starting her own boutique agency focused on ethical brands. The blue emergency lighting made everything feel surreal, like they existed outside normal time and space. "You know what's strange?" Victoria said after they had been talking for nearly an hour. I feel more relaxed right now, stuck in a broken elevator, than I have in months. Gabriel's smile was soft in the dim light. Maybe that says something about the elevator, or maybe it says something about the company. Before Victoria could respond, the intercom crackled to life. Hello. Is anyone in there? Yes. Victoria jumped up. We're here. This is building maintenance. We're working on the problem. Should have you out in about 20 minutes. Victoria felt a strange disappointment as Gabriel stood and straightened his tie. 20 minutes. That was all they had left of this unexpected interlude. I should probably warn you, Gabriel said, his voice lighter but somehow more tentative. I have a tendency to remember conversations like this. Especially with interesting people met in unusual circumstances. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Victoria asked, surprised by her own boldness. I guess we'll find out. When the elevator finally lurched back to life 18 minutes later, Victoria felt like Cinderella watching the clock strike midnight. The spell was about to break, and she would return to her world of failed presentations and disappointed bosses while he returned to his realm of high-stakes investments and boardroom decisions. The doors opened at her floor first. She hesitated, one foot in the elevator and one in the hallway. Victoria, Gabriel said quietly. She turned back to look at him, this stranger who somehow felt familiar. For what it's worth, I think your boss is wrong. Innovation isn't about following formulas. It's about seeing possibilities that others miss. Something tells me you're better at that than you think. The elevator doors began to close, and Victoria didn't stop them. She watched Gabriel's face disappear behind the steel, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with her claustrophobia and everything to do with the men she had just met. As she walked to her office, Victoria realized she didn't even know Gabriel's last name or where he worked. She had no way to find him again, no way to continue whatever had started in that elevator. All she had was the memory of green eyes, a vintage watch, and the feeling that something important had just walked out of her life before she had fully understood what it was. That night, Victoria lay awake replaying every word of their conversation, wondering if he was doing the same. She found herself listening for the sound of elevators in her building, as if they might somehow bring him back to her. She didn't know that 40 floors above where they had met, Gabriel Rivers was staring out his office window at the city lights, thinking about a woman named Victoria Sterling and wondering if fate ever gave second chances to people who were too surprised to exchange phone numbers the first time around. 3 days had passed since the elevator incident, and Victoria Sterling found herself checking her reflection in every mirrored surface she encountered, wondering if she might somehow run into Gabriel Rivers again. The rational part of her mind insisted this was foolish behavior, but the memory of their conversation continued to surface at the most inconvenient moments during client meetings and strategy sessions. Monday morning arrived with the typical chaos of a marketing firm preparing for new client presentations. Victoria sat in the main conference room, reviewing project briefs while her colleague Chloe Martinez buzzed with excitement about their newest potential account. This could change everything for our department, Chloe whispered, sliding into the seat beside Victoria. Rivers Capital wants a complete rebranding campaign for their expansion into sustainable investing. The budget alone would cover our team's targets for the entire quarter. Victoria's pen froze mid-sentence. Rivers Capital. Gabriel Rivers himself is coming in today. Marcus has been preparing for weeks. Apparently, Rivers is known for being incredibly selective about partnerships. He's turned down 3 major agencies already. The conference room suddenly felt smaller, the air thinner. Victoria forced herself to breathe normally while her mind raced through the implications. Gabriel Rivers, the man who had listened to her dreams and fears in a broken elevator, was about to walk through those doors as their most important prospective client. Before she could process this revelation fully, Marcus Thompson entered the room with his characteristic air of barely contained stress. Sterling, Martinez, I need this presentation to be flawless. Rivers Capital represents exactly the kind of prestige client we need to elevate our firm's profile. Victoria nodded mechanically, her attention divided between Marcus's instructions and the growing certainty that her professional and personal worlds were about to collide in the most complicated way possible. The conference room doors opened precisely at 10 o'clock. Gabriel entered with 2 associates, his presence commanding attention even in the crowded room. He wore a navy suit that emphasized his height and carried himself with the quiet confidence Victoria remembered, but his expression was carefully neutral, professional. Their eyes met across the conference table, and Victoria witnessed the briefest flicker of surprise before his features settled into polite attention. He gave no other indication that they had met before, maintaining perfect composure as Marcus began the introductions. "Mr. Rivers, welcome to Sterling and Associates. I'm Marcus Thompson, senior partner, and these are our lead strategists, Victoria Sterling and Chloe Martinez." Gabriel's handshake was firm and brief when he reached Victoria, his voice professionally cordial. "Miss Sterling, a pleasure to meet you." The formality stung, though Victoria understood the necessity. She managed a polite smile while internally marveling at how different he seemed in this environment. The man who had shared personal stories about his father now appeared every inch the successful CEO, controlled and slightly distant. Marcus launched into the presentation with enthusiasm, outlining their agency's experience with luxury brands and sustainable marketing initiatives. Victoria found herself studying Gabriel's reactions, noting how he listened with complete attention while occasionally adjusting the vintage watch she remembered. When Marcus finished, Gabriel leaned forward slightly. "Impressive portfolio. However, I'm particularly interested in innovative approaches to authentic storytelling. Too many campaigns feel manufactured, lacking genuine connection with their intended audience." Victoria recognized an opening and spoke before she could second-guess herself. Authentic storytelling requires understanding that consumers today respond to vulnerability and real human experiences rather than polished perfection. The most effective campaigns create emotional resonance by acknowledging shared struggles and aspirations. Gabriel's attention focused entirely on her, and Victoria felt the same connection they had shared in the elevator, now complicated by professional boundaries and watching colleagues. "Could you elaborate on that approach, Miss Sterling?" For the next 20 minutes, Victoria presented her vision for Rivers Capital's rebrand, drawing on concepts she had only dreamed of implementing. She spoke about campaigns that highlighted real entrepreneur stories, sustainability efforts that showed genuine impact rather than corporate greenwashing, and investment approaches that prioritized long-term community benefit alongside financial returns. Gabriel asked probing questions that demonstrated his deep understanding of both business strategy and social responsibility. Victoria found herself engaging with him on a level that transcended typical client presentations, their conversation flowing with the same natural rhythm they had discovered in the elevator. When the meeting concluded, Gabriel stood and shook hands with the team. "Thank you for your time. We'll be in touch within the week." As the Rivers Capital team departed, Marcus barely contained his excitement. "Sterling, that was exceptional work. I think we have a real chance at landing this account." Victoria nodded absently, watching Gabriel's retreating figure and wondering what happened next. The answer came 2 hours later in the form of an email that appeared in her inbox with the subject line, "Project Discussion." The message was brief and professionally worded, requesting a follow-up meeting to discuss specific campaign elements. However, Victoria noticed that Gabriel had sent it directly to her rather than routing it through Marcus, and he had suggested meeting at a coffee shop near the office rather than in the conference room. Wednesday afternoon found Victoria seated in the corner booth of Grind Coffee, attempting to review her notes while hyper-aware of every person who entered. Gabriel arrived exactly on time, looking less formal in a charcoal sweater and dark jeans, though no less compelling. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, sliding into the opposite seat. "I wanted to discuss your campaign concepts in more detail." "Of course." Victoria opened her portfolio, grateful to have concrete material to focus on rather than the way his presence affected her pulse rate. They spent an hour dissecting marketing strategies and target demographics, their conversation professional yet charged with underlying tension. Gabriel asked thoughtful questions about implementation timelines and budget allocations, while Victoria provided detailed explanations of her creative vision. Finally, Gabriel set down his coffee cup and met her eyes directly. "I have to ask, did you develop these concepts before or after our conversation in the elevator?" Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks. Some elements were already forming, but our discussion helped clarify certain aspects. The focus on authentic storytelling and supporting innovation, those themes resonated with what we talked about. Perhaps. Victoria hesitated, then decided honesty was preferable to pretense. "I've been thinking about that conversation quite a bit, actually." Gabriel's smile was the first genuinely personal expression he had shown since entering the conference room 3 days earlier. "So have I." Which creates an interesting situation. Complicated might be a better word. Complicated, Gabriel agreed. But not impossible to navigate. They began meeting regularly, ostensibly to refine campaign details but increasingly to simply enjoy each other's company. Gabriel proved to be an engaging conversationalist with strong opinions about everything from urban development to classical music. Victoria discovered that his serious professional demeanor concealed a dry sense of humor and genuine passion for supporting emerging businesses. Their relationship evolved carefully, bounded by professional considerations but deepening with each interaction. Gabriel would suggest restaurants for their project discussions that happened to serve excellent wine, while Victoria found reasons to extend their meetings beyond necessary business. The shift from professional collaboration to personal connection occurred gradually, then suddenly. During their fourth meeting, while reviewing mock-ups of campaign materials, Gabriel's hand brushed hers as they reached for the same document. Instead of pulling away, Victoria let her fingers linger against his. "Victoria," Gabriel said quietly, his voice carrying the same warmth she remembered from the elevator. "Yes. I think we should acknowledge that this has become about more than business." Victoria set down the papers she had been holding. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that elevator broke down. And I'm hoping you might feel the same way." The coffee shop around them seemed to fade as Victoria looked into Gabriel's green eyes. "I do feel the same way. But you're right about it being complicated. Most worthwhile things are." Gabriel reached across the table and took her hand properly, his thumb tracing across her knuckles. "I'd like to take you to dinner. Somewhere that has nothing to do with campaigns or client presentations. Just two people who met in an elevator and discovered they enjoy each other's company." Victoria's smile felt like the first genuine expression she had made in days. "I'd like that very much." Their first official date took place at a small Italian restaurant in Capitol Hill, candlelit and intimate enough for real conversation. Gabriel proved to be an attentive companion, asking about her childhood in Portland and her decision to pursue marketing. Victoria learned about his graduate studies at Wharton, his early struggles establishing Rivers Capital, and his ongoing efforts to balance profitable investments with social responsibility. The evening felt like a natural continuation of their elevator conversation, deepened by weeks of professional interaction and mutual attraction. When Gabriel walked her to her car, Victoria felt the same reluctance to end their time together that she had experienced when the elevator doors finally opened. "I have a confession," Gabriel said as they stood beside her Honda Civic. "What's that?" "I've been hoping that elevator would break down again, just so I'd have an excuse to spend more time with you." Victoria laughed. "That's either very romantic or slightly concerning." "I was hoping for romantic." Gabriel stepped closer, and Victoria found herself holding her breath as he cupped her face gently. Their first kiss was soft and tentative, then deeper as Victoria responded, her arms sliding around his neck. When they finally separated, both were breathing unsteadily. "This is definitely more than complicated now," Victoria whispered. "Definitely," Gabriel agreed, resting his forehead against hers. "But I'm willing to figure it out if you are." Victoria's answer was another kiss, this one leaving no doubt about her feelings. As she drove home through the Seattle streets, she couldn't stop smiling. The broken elevator had given her more than an interesting story to tell, it had given her a chance at something extraordinary. The Rivers Capital campaign had been running for 6 weeks when Victoria Sterling received the phone call that would change everything. She was reviewing quarterly performance metrics in her office when Marcus Thompson's voice crackled through the intercom, requesting her immediate presence in the conference room. Victoria gathered her materials with practiced efficiency, though something in Marcus's tone suggested this meeting would be different from their usual project reviews. She entered the conference room to find Marcus seated across from two individuals she had never seen before, a stern-looking woman in a navy suit and a younger man with wire-rimmed glasses who appeared to be taking notes. "Victoria, please have a seat," Marcus said, his usual brusque manner replaced by careful formality. "This is Janet Morrison from our legal department and David Chen from Human Resources. We need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to our attention regarding your relationship with Gabriel Rivers." Victoria felt her professional composure solidify even as her heart rate increased. She had known this conversation was inevitable, though she had hoped to have more time to prepare for it. "What specific concerns are you referring to?" Janet Morrison opened a file folder with deliberate precision. "We have received information suggesting that your relationship with Mr. Rivers extends beyond professional boundaries. As you are aware, our firm has strict policies regarding personal relationships with clients, particularly those involving substantial financial arrangements. I understand the policy guidelines, Victoria replied evenly. However, I want to clarify that my relationship with Mr. Rivers developed after the initial client presentation and has not affected the quality or integrity of our professional work. David Chin looked up from his notes. Ms. Sterling, the issue is not necessarily about work quality. The concern is about potential conflicts of interest and how such relationships might affect future business decisions. There are also questions about whether your personal connection to Mr. Rivers influenced the selection of our firm for this project. Victoria felt a flash of anger at the implication, though she maintained her professional demeanor. I can assure you that Rivers Capital selected our firm based on the merits of our proposal and our demonstrated expertise in sustainable marketing campaigns. The personal relationship developed subsequently and has been conducted with complete transparency regarding potential conflicts. Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious but not unsympathetic. Victoria, I want to be clear that we value your contributions to this firm. Your work on the Rivers campaign has been exceptional, and the client feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. However, we need to address this situation in a way that protects both you and the firm from potential complications. What are you proposing? Victoria asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Janet Morrison consulted her notes before responding. We are recommending that you recuse yourself from direct involvement with the Rivers Capital account. Chloe Martinez would assume primary responsibility for client communications, while you would transition to a supervisory role with limited direct contact with Mr. Rivers. Victoria considered the proposal carefully. From the firm's perspective, it represented a reasonable compromise that would address potential conflicts while preserving the client relationship. However, she also recognized that accepting such an arrangement would effectively validate the suggestion that her professional judgment had been compromised. I appreciate the firm's desire to address this situation appropriately, Victoria said after a measured pause. However, I believe the proposed solution sends an incorrect message about both my professional integrity and the nature of my relationship with Mr. Rivers. I would prefer to discuss alternative approaches that might better serve everyone's interests. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, with various options being discussed and evaluated. Victoria maintained her position that her professional work had not been compromised, while acknowledging the firm's legitimate concerns about potential conflicts. Eventually, they agreed to postpone any final decisions until after Victoria had an opportunity to discuss the situation with Gabriel. That evening, Victoria sat across from Gabriel at their usual restaurant, struggling to find the right words to explain the afternoon's developments. Gabriel listened attentively as she described the meeting and the firm's proposed solution, his expression growing more serious as she spoke. I want you to know that I never intended for our relationship to create problems for your career, Gabriel said when she finished. If my presence is causing difficulties, perhaps we should consider adjusting our approach. Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. Gabriel, I need you to understand something. What we have is worth fighting for, but not at the expense of compromising either of our professional positions. We need to find a way to handle this situation that respects both our personal feelings and our professional responsibilities. Gabriel nodded thoughtfully. What if we approach this differently? Rivers Capital could complete the current campaign with your firm as planned, but future projects could be handled by other agencies. That would remove the ongoing conflict while allowing you to maintain your current professional position. That could work, Victoria agreed, but it would mean less opportunity for us to work together professionally, which has been one of the aspects of our relationship that I have most enjoyed. Sometimes the best solutions require sacrifice from both parties, Gabriel observed. The question is whether we believe our personal relationship is strong enough to thrive without the professional connection. Victoria smiled at his practical approach to their complex situation. I think we should find out. Over the following weeks, they implemented their revised arrangement with careful attention to maintaining professional boundaries while nurturing their personal relationship. Victoria resumed full responsibility for the Rivers Capital campaign, while Gabriel made it clear to his team that future marketing projects would be handled by different agencies to avoid any appearance of favoritism. The arrangement worked better than either of them had anticipated. Without the complications of ongoing business relationships, they were able to focus entirely on their personal connection. Gabriel introduced Victoria to his mother, Eleanor Rivers, a gracious woman who had raised Gabriel alone after his father's death and clearly approved of Victoria's influence on her son. Victoria, in turn, brought Gabriel into her circle of friends and family, including her parents during their visit from Portland. Gabriel's easy charm and genuine interest in others made him immediately popular with everyone Victoria cared about, while his obvious devotion to her earned him their complete approval. 6 months after their first elevator encounter, Gabriel surprised Victoria with a weekend trip to San Juan Island. They stayed at a boutique hotel overlooking the water, spending their days exploring local vineyards and their evenings walking along the coastline. On their final night, as they sat on the hotel's terrace watching the sunset, Gabriel reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Victoria," he said, his voice carrying the same nervous excitement she remembered from their first meeting, "I have been thinking about timing quite a bit lately. My father always said that timing was everything in business and in life, and I believe he was right about that." Victoria felt her breath catch as Gabriel opened the box to reveal a stunning engagement ring, the diamond catching the last rays of sunlight. "The timing of our meeting was unexpected," Gabriel continued, "but everything that has happened since then has convinced me that some things are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, and worth building a future around. Victoria Sterling, will you marry me?" Victoria's answer came without hesitation. "Yes, Gabriel Rivers. Absolutely yes." Their wedding took place 8 months later in a ceremony that perfectly reflected their shared values and personal style. They chose a venue in the Olympic National Park, surrounded by towering evergreens and overlooking a pristine lake. Victoria wore her grandmother's pearl necklace with a simple but elegant dress, while Gabriel wore his father's vintage watch with a classic navy suit. The ceremony was intimate, attended by close family and friends who had watched their relationship develop from its unlikely beginning. Chloe Martinez served as Victoria's maid of honor, while Gabriel's college roommate stood as his best man. Eleanor Rivers wept openly during the exchange of vows, clearly delighted to officially welcome Victoria into the family. During their reception, Gabriel surprised Victoria by arranging for the hotel's vintage elevator to be temporarily taken out of service and decorated with flowers and fairy lights. "I thought we should have our first dance in the place where it all began," he explained, leading her into the transformed elevator. As they swayed together to soft music, Victoria reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a chance encounter in a broken elevator had evolved into something neither of them could have anticipated, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if that elevator hadn't broken down?" Victoria asked, her head resting against Gabriel's shoulder. Gabriel smiled, his arms tightening around her. "I prefer to think that some things are meant to happen, regardless of the circumstances. We might have met differently, but I believe we would have found each other eventually." Victoria laughed softly. "That's very romantic for an investment manager." "I've learned that the best investments are the ones that appreciate over time," Gabriel replied. "And I plan to invest in us for the rest of my life." As their dance ended and they rejoined their celebration, Victoria realized that their story had come full circle. They had met as strangers trapped between floors, discovered love while navigating professional complications, and emerged as partners ready to build a future together. The elevator that had brought them together had become a symbol of unexpected possibilities and perfect timing. Later that evening, as they prepared to leave for their honeymoon in Tuscany, Victoria and Gabriel took one last ride in the hotel elevator. This time, it functioned perfectly, carrying them smoothly to their floor without interruption. As the doors opened, Gabriel took Victoria's hand and smiled. "Ready for the next adventure, Mrs. Rivers?" Victoria squeezed his hand, her heart full of joy and anticipation for their future together. "Always, Mr. Rivers. Always."